Welcome, listener. This is Sebastian Nothwell here today with Noah Hawthorne,
Hello.
Sarah Wallace,
Hello.
and Tess Carletta.
Hi.
Today discussing the topic of libraries.
Woohoo!
Yay!
Yay!
Great and wonderful.
Spoiler alert, libraries? Yes.
We love them.
That's it. That's the whole episode.
Yeah, TLDR is we love libraries.
Libraries? Good, actually. Noah, why do you love your library?
My first experiences with the library, I didn't go into public school until I was in ninth grade, and the school library was my favorite place. And then I became an adult, and I didn't go to the library until actually in like the last 5 years or so. And I forgot how much I loved reading, and I was able to get back into it without spending a lot of money. And I always like finding like niche or just books that aren't really talked about a lot. But since then, I've really connected with all the local libraries in my area, the librarians, not just as a reader, but as an author. And in doing both, I've discovered a lot more services that libraries offer that I didn't realize. So it's just really become this place that I love to go, and not just for getting books, but to see the people there, and just a place to kind of exist in the in between, like in between getting groceries and being out. It's just a nice place to be a human.
Yeah, libraries are kind of unique among third spaces in that it doesn't cost money to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also, unlike, say, a bar or a nightclub, they're all ages. So, like, anyone can go in without a dime to their name and just kind of be somewhere other than work and home.
Well, and accessible too.
Yes.
If you go into like a bar or a nightclub, I mean, not everyone is physically able to go and dance in a nightclub. Some people are neurodivergent. They don't like the sound, they don't like the lights, or even people at bars who don't drink. And those spaces aren't welcoming to literally everyone in the way that a library is.
Exactly. Sarah, why do you love your library?
I live in Orlando, and the Orange County Public Library is absolutely phenomenal. The downtown library, it's very cool. It's this old 70s kind of utilitarian building, 4 stories high, which compared to a lot of other libraries is not very big, but for me, it always felt like a huge library. And I love it because it not only has books, but it has like really great sections for kids. It has a special section for teenagers. It has lots of local events. They have classes. They have like a sewing studio. They have a 3D printer. They have so many different classes. They have like a photography studio. They have a filmography studio. And so they have all these different places within the library itself where you can go and learn things and use equipment that may not be accessible otherwise. So I really love my library for all of the reasons.
Tess, why do you love your library?
Oh, I've been going to the library since I was very little. I was just telling my local librarians that the card itself is 20 years old. They're like, we haven't seen this card before. And I'm like, I don't think they make them like this. I think they stopped doing that like 10 years ago. My mom made sure that I had a library card when I was very young. So it's always been ingrained. And then, like everyone else, just having a welcoming, accessible space with a lot of different services, access to books, which is like obviously one of our favorite things, is wonderful. But I am the only person on the call right now who actually works in a library. I'm technically the public services manager, which means that I'm in charge of the circulation desk, but I've been doing a lot more than that. So I'm some type of library specialist. So I have a love for libraries because I know a lot about the behind the scenes stuff as well.
Excellent.
What about you, Sebastian? What do you love about libraries?
Yeah.
So the way I was raised, the public library as an important institution was very much emphasized by everyone raising me, but I didn't really appreciate the library until I got into high school. And then it became kind of like a lifeline, just in terms of like having a safe space to meet friends where like nobody's drinking or doing drugs and like no one has to pay to be there. And it's just like a nice neutral ground to meet everybody where like no one's parents can get mad because we're at the library.
I feel that so hard.
And then it also became, again, a safe space to explore being queer and queer history. Like, I can look things up without my parents looking over my shoulder. I can check out books that I need to learn about who and what I am, and I can kind of explore all of that in a way where it doesn't have to impact my personal safety.
That's really cool.
And then on a more shallow note, it was great to be able to explore media for the no money I had because I was 14 and had no job. But
I mean, I don't think that's shallow. That's an accessibility aspect of it too.
Right.
Yeah.
Equal access to knowledge and materials and information.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, you know, pre high speed home Wi-Fi, it was a great way to expose myself to like different ideas, different cultures, and different stories that I otherwise would just not have had access to.
Mhm.
Also, they let me volunteer there senior year of high school, and without that, I wouldn't have had the necessary work study credits to graduate. So hey.
All of the reasons.
It's always a bonus.
Just a random question of like origins of library love. Did anybody have like rules for how many books you could check out when you were a kid?
I think the children's section of the library did have like a limit, but it was fairly generous. Like I think it was like 10 books per visit.
Makes sense. My mom made us all library book bags, and we could only check out as many books that could fit in the book bags. I think I still have mine. Had a little pocket for the library card.
Oh my god, that's adorable.
Right? I always think it's interesting to find out if people's parents had like, oh, you can only check out as many books as can fit in your arms, or you can only check out 5, or whatever.
See, I wasn't really exposed to the library.
At the library that I work at, we have a somewhat modest children's section because we're an academic library and not like a public library, but we do still have plenty of children's books. And we sometimes will have parents and their children come up to the library, and the kids will ask me, like, how many books can I check out? And I'm like, as many as you want. And they're like, as many as I want. And I'm like, you're 7, and so your muscles aren't very strong. So maybe as many as you can carry, but yeah, as many as you want. And then they come down with stuff that they've never, considered reading before, like nonfiction and biographies and stuff that they just grabbed because they could.
That's cool.
Noah, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I wasn't really exposed to libraries as a kid, actually. So, like I said, my first experience was the school library in high school. And I would usually, like, get a book, read it that day, and put it back. Like, I would read them in school. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't bring them home often. But now I've gone to the library with my daughter, like, ever since she was really young. Like really, really young, and we've always done that, and that's kind of like ingrained in her, like how you guys were saying your parents did with you. And my rule is as many as you carry, more than that, and we're gonna have to come back.
So we are all authors, and we did all mention reading as a major motivation for going to and enjoying the library, but there are some services that libraries offer besides books that may surprise you. Doctors hate these weird library tricks. Click now.
Where I live, like in addition to book, you get a spinning wheel.
What?
There's music instruments. Yes, there's music instruments. There's tools. I think they even have some like power tools as well. One of them you can borrow a Nintendo Switch, and a lot of them have gaming systems you can use there, which is pretty cool. There's chess, printing. One of them is like a garden seed library, so you can get packets of seeds.
I love that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's more, but that's what I got off the top of my head.
Maker space is what they usually call it, the room with all the power tools and all the fancy equipment. That's becoming increasingly more popular just because they give people access to expensive equipment that they might not otherwise have available to them. It started, I think, in schools, but is becoming more popular in public libraries, like 3D printers and Cricut machines and like laser etchers and like saws and, the whole shebang, so that you can go into the library and you can pursue your hobbies without having the barrier of, oh, I don't have the right space for this at home, or I don't have the right equipment, I don't have the money to get started. You can go to the library and usually that's available to you. And I think that's really cool.
Libraries even cooler than previously supposed.
One thing, too, that I think is super cool is that libraries still have access to not only all the new stuff, but all the old stuff. So, like microfilm and microfiche. So, if you need access to, like, old newspapers and stuff, a lot of times we have, like, a microfilm reader. They're becoming less and less popular, but that's there for you as well, all the old equipment, in case things haven't been digitized yet.
Or in case the digitized versions have been paywalled.
Yes.
Me staring daggers across the pond at the UK newspaper archive.
I think I had mentioned, but my library offers a lot of like different studio setups. So we have like a sewing studio and recording studios, both audio and like video recording. And like one thing I learned recently, my cousin and I went to the library to use a study room, and we asked the librarian at the help desk how to book one. She showed us, and then she also did what I suspect is a quintessentially librarian thing of let me show you all of the things. Where she like gave us like a little mini tour online of all the different things we could do in the library, which was really cool. One of which was that like we can apparently get free tickets to local events. If we go through the library, they have like a certain amount of like free admission. And so like that day my cousin and I went home and we got tickets to go see a performance of The Rite of Spring.
Oh my god.
And we went and watched it together. It was so cool. And it was like this random thing that we happened to ask this librarian, and she happened to be like, oh, I will give you a very long explanation of all the things that we have to offer. And we're like, oh my god, this is cool.
That's rad.
Hell yeah.
I would have expected Sebastian's library to have like maritime theme items to use. I don't know why, but I just imagine that. Oh, that is something else you could borrow in one of the libraries here, though, are fishing poles and fishing equipment.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
No, your library's cool as hell.
Yeah.
Well, there's like, it's like, they call it the North Country Library System. So, like, if you borrow a book from one library, you can return it at another or something like that, which is also really nice. So, yeah, they're all kind of like interconnected and supply with what other ones don't.
The library's been connected is something called interlibrary loan. Interlibrary loan is something that happens through the connected libraries. And that's pretty standard most places, which I super appreciate because, like, where I'm from, I'm 30 minutes away from the main library branch. So I can give my librarians the book and be like, send it off to its rightful owner.
Yeah, interlibrary loan has made research way easier for me personally and has saved me several $1,000s in books. No, I'm not kidding, because specialized nonfiction research material is pretty expensive, so...
I love it when they give you the receipt.
Oh yeah, to like show how much you would have spent on books if you hadn't got them through the library, yeah.
Yeah, mine's like over $1,000 this year so far.
Oh, wow.
Hot damn. And another fun way to use interlibrary loan is through digital apps such as Libby and Hoopla.
What a segue.
They're the best.
Mm-hmm.
So smooth.
That's just all the physical things we were talking about. That's not even mentioning all the ebooks, audiobooks. And there's also like what, Kanopy?
Kanopy!
Yes.
Oh,
I love Kanopy.
A+ everybody.
You can get like master classes and stuff like that.
Oh, I haven't checked that. I love Kanopy for like because they have a pretty good selection of old. I'm a big old movie fan. I have a pretty good selection of old movies on there, which is really nice. For listeners, Kanopy with a K is an app you can use that you can typically log in with your library and access different digital features.
So it'd be a lot of like streaming TV and movies and...
It depends on what the library chooses to have specifically. Like for us, Kanopy is very much educational kind of stuff. Like, so there's like biographies, there's documentaries, there's films that have some type of educational value to them. Our students never used them super, like, as much as they should have. So we got rid of kind of the whole streaming service as a whole because it's really expensive. So if you have access to Kanopy, I urge you to use it because that way you'll be able to, show your library that the money that they're investing into it is in fact worth it. But now we just get individual films.
I have most experience with the Libby app, who is my very best friend and will be the best man at my wedding. So...
You and me both.
What are the benefits of the Libby app?
Libby is for ebooks and audiobooks. So unlike Hoopla or Kanopy, you don't get the streaming TV and movies, but you do get free ebooks and audiobooks, which is great. And I really love their e-reader. I prefer it over like Kindle or BookFunnel or anything else, really. It's just like very easy to use, very easy to find what I need, very easy to hop around the book like I like to do. I love it so very much. And on Libby, you can add multiple library cards, which means you can add your local library, the one, within a certain number of miles from where you live, that you get a physical card from. But you can also look around your state or county to see if any other libraries would consider you digitally local and give you a library card as well. For example, if you have a Massachusetts zip code, you're eligible for an online Boston Public Library card, which gives you access to their entire digital collection as well as other resources such as JSTOR. which again has saved me literally thousands of dollars in research material.
And the Queer Liberation Library also, right?
And the Queer Liberation Library, which is a library that is not tied to a geographic location more specific than the United States. If you live in the United States, you can email them to get a Queer Liberation Library card, which means that you can access their specifically queer collection of books, nonfiction and fiction alike, which is incredible because, hey, remember that thing I mentioned earlier about how libraries give you a safe space to be queer? This is even better than that because now instead of taking a queer book home to your house where it might not be safe for you to have it, or asking in a particularly unfriendly location to take out a queer book from the library, which again might not necessarily be safe, it's entirely digital, it's just in your phone. You can get all the queer materials you need in like near perfect privacy.
It is amazing.
The order of operations, I would say, like requesting materials, I would go local library first, county or state library system second, and then Queer Liberation Library third, if only because me personally, I would want to prioritize Queer Liberation Library access for people who cannot necessarily safely access queer materials otherwise.
Makes sense.
But their collection is expanding every day. They're doing a fundraiser drive right now to stay open for another year. And yeah, go love and support your Queer Liberation Library.
Now, I just started using Hoopla, which Sarah Wallace and everybody else has been yelling at me to use.
I love Hoopla.
I love Hoopla.
I have only very recently gotten Hoopla to work. I've been trying for 6 years.
Ugh.
Oh my god.
Yes, I had the whole debacle and I got it to work. And I've got to say, like, so I mostly use Libby for audiobooks. I have read a couple of ebooks on it, but I also use Hoopla for audiobooks. And I think the biggest difference I found is you can find like more indie books and there's no hold time. Like you can just check it out whenever.
For bitches who lack patience.
Yeah, I think the selection through my local library is like it's definitely different. And I think having Libby and Hoopla, I can pretty much find anything I need without having to buy it. And I think Hoopla also has movies.
And music.
And I like the Hoopla audiobook interface is one of my favorite audiobook interfaces because you can adjust the speed with like a drag scale thing. And so you can go like very, very small increments.
Precise.
Yes. And so it's really nice for if you're like, this is like a really specific thing, but like if you're training up your ear and your brain to like listen at a faster speed, Hoopla app is great for that because you're not going up by like 0.5. You're going up by like 0.25. And so you can like incrementally speed it up, and it's really great for if you kind of training your brain to read at faster speeds. The Hoopla app is really good for that. And I just think that the general interface of the app is really nice. So
The one thing I really don't like about Hoopla is because they do streaming video as well as audio and just ebooks, you can't take any screenshots while the app is open. So if I'm reading something in an ebook and I want to screenshot it to quote it for later, I cannot do that in Hoopla.
oh,
And when I discovered this, the scream of rage that emerged from me.
I mean, I know it. We all know exactly what that is. That's copyright protection, but
Exactly. It is copyright protection for their video. It's the same reason you can't take screenshots on like HBO Max or Netflix.
I mean, I've screenshotted where I am in an audiobook because sometimes if I listen on a computer and sometimes if I listen on a phone, they don't sync up properly and then I end up losing my spot. So sometimes I'll screenshot where I'm at just as like my own personal bookmark, and that's worked.
One of the other ways in which Libby and Hoopla differ is that the Libby collection is more limited to books your library has specifically chosen to put in their collection, whereas Hoopla gives them access to a more like generalized media library.
yes.
And that is part of why in Libby, when your library doesn't have a particular book, but it still shows up in the search results, you have what they call the Notify Me feature, which anonymously tells your library that, hey, a patron in this library wants this book specifically, which significantly increases the chances of the book being added to your library's collection.
More on this later.
Which is fantastic for indie authors specifically,
Yes.
who might not otherwise be considered by your library.
So if you're listening to this and you have a bunch of indie authors that you want to support without spending any money, then go to your local Libby app and request all of their books. And it is a free way to support indie authors and your library at the same time.
Precisely.
They definitely want to see these apps are being used, you know, like don't feel like you're taking anything away from anybody or it's costing them money, or that's what they budget for. And if, you know, it's a use it or lose it kind of thing, from what I understand.
Yes, exactly.
The TLDR, because we have been everywhere with these two apps, is that Libby, you get like maybe what, 3 checkouts depending on your library. But you're beholden to the amount of holds that there are on a book, and it depends on what the library has chosen. As where Hoopla has one concrete catalog, you get 6 checkouts a month, which refresh every month.
It depends on your library. Some Hoopla accounts differ.
Yeah.
I get 10.
I was gonna say, I don't think I've ever hit the upper limit on Libby.
Well, that's what I'm saying. For both of these apps, the limit is usually plenty.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to take advantage of them.
And from like a writer standpoint, I think it is notable to discuss the differences in the two library platforms in that Libby is one copy, one customer format, as in the library buys a digital copy. And so you might notice if you've got like an upcoming release and you go to put a hold, on that book, there might be just one copy. And then come release day, the library realizes that there's a huge long list of holds. And so they will buy another 10 digital copies. And then each copy goes to one user until that user is done, and then it goes back to the next user. Whereas Hoopla has a different format. Basically, as long as it exists in the system, people can read it. And so it's a different format where if you can see it, then that means it's available for you to use. You don't have to wait in line for it. It's available right away. From the author standpoint, this is different in how you get paid, because with the one copy, one customer format, you get paid by the copy. Whereas the Hoopla format, you get paid, I believe, by checkout.
Mm-hmm.
So every time the book is checked out, you get paid. You get paid technically, I think, a little less, but you might get paid more over time because, as we've sort of discussed before, for example, my books are on Hoopla, which means that I've got people potentially checking out my books on Hoopla that might not have otherwise done so. Whereas on Libby, if they haven't requested from their library, or if they've requested and the library hasn't gotten enough requests for it yet, so they haven't ordered it, they're still waiting for that book to show up in Libby. And so I might get paid more for a Libby copy, but meanwhile, I'm getting paid a little less per copy with Hoopla, but I'm getting paid more overall because it's already existing there and people are already reading it, if that makes sense.
I think you got it right on the money.
And I want to add too, and I think the processing times as far as an audiobook or anything to Hoopla is quite a long time, correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's like 3 weeks. Oh, well, it depends actually. I know that with my ebooks, they varied because I've had some show up immediately. And Letters to Moon Street, which was the first book I released 2 years ago, didn't show up until January of this year. It took 2 years for it to show up, and it was when I dropped it to free. And it's like, oh, hey, now it's available. I'm like, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
But all the other books were already there, and they had all been published well after Letters to Moon Street, but that was the last one to show up. So, like, the processing times vary wildly with Hoopla. So, expect a long wait, and then hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised. Good note, Noah.
I was gonna say, I published my first book 7 years ago, and I'm still not on Hoopla.
Oh,
Yeah, it's I don't know. I would say it's a process. I don't know what the process is.
that's one thing about libraries. Libraries always do things a little slow. That's because nothing at the library is life or death, usually, hopefully. So, like, Hoopla happenings are not life or death, so we're just sort of like easing our way through it, taking our time. For better or for worse.
But Kobo, I believe, Kobo, you can distribute directly from Kobo Writing Life to either Overdrive, which is the back end side of Libby. So either Overdrive or Hoopla, I forget which. But one of the two, Kobo offers a direct distribution there, and the benefit is that I think you get paid slightly more if you go through Hoopla. So if any listening indie authors are considering publishing direct to Kobo, it's a good option to check the library option on Kobo as opposed to Drafted Digital, because you'll get paid a little bit more. Fun fact.
If you're curious more about publishing wide, publishing directly, you should follow Sarah Wallace because they do all sorts of fun classes
Thank you.
through which we learn many facts just like this.
Just like this. I just learned the Kobo one today because I had a book checked out on how to connect with libraries, and I thought I should read that right now before this podcast episode.
Good timing.
This is fresh into my brain, that information.
And if you publish through Smashwords, you can set separate pricing for libraries, which is how I have made all of my ebooks free for libraries.
Oh.
So if you need an excuse to get your library to stock a Sebastian Nothwell copy, do let them know. It costs $0 if you're a library.
Interesting. I did not know that.
On behalf of libraries everywhere, thank you. So everyone, how can indie authors get their books into libraries?
What an incredible question, Tess. How can we?
Well, as we discussed before, there's Kobo, as Sarah said, and also Draft to Digital, which is what I use, and you can distribute to many different places, including Overdrive and Hoopla, which are both used by libraries. And I believe you said Overdrive is how Libby gets it?
Yes.
Yes.
I actually didn't even know that. I was just like, Overdrive is a library thing.
From what I understand, it's the librarian's view of Libby, essentially. And also, I double-checked, Overdrive/Libby is what Kobo publishes directly to. They have some sort of connection with them. So, clear up that confusion.
If you're a reader, here's how you can help indie authors get their books into libraries. You can request the books at the library. Generally, the library may have a specific budget set aside for books to be purchased or books to be purchased. So when I was little, I used to request books all the time. Like the Sisters Grimm books were really popular, and I wanted to just keep reading them every single time that they came out. So I would ask the librarian if they could please purchase the book so that I could read it, and they would. So that's one way to just help out, is you can go to the librarian and be like, I'm interested in this book. Is there any possibility of it coming to the library? If you're an author yourself, you can check the library website, or you can email them to ask them how they prefer indie authors get added to the catalog. So locally here, I had to fill out a form, and it took a little bit of time for the librarian to review the text to make sure that it was something that they were interested in adding to the library. It was, and then I had to, once I got the okay, bring in a few copies of the book as a donation. So I didn't necessarily get paid for that copy, but boohoo, I'll live. I was really happy to support the library. If it's not your local library, you could reach out to them via email and just say, like, I think I did that one time for a reader, where a reader was like, it's not safe for me to have queer books. I'd like to have it in the library. And I said, if you let me know what your library is, I can reach out to them and say, hey, you've got patrons who want to read this book. I'd be happy to send you one so that you can have it available for them. The only thing is, that's probably the least successful way, is because at the library we get a lot of spam emails being like, I wrote a book on why the moon is flat and also the earth is flat. Please buy it for $1,000. And it's like, we're not going to do that. So whatever you can do to make yourself look legitimate, and again, going through InkSpark and Draft Digital will help with that immensely. But generally, that's how you can go about it.
And also, another way to get your books into libraries is something that I've learned recently, is libraries are the biggest consumer for large print books. And if you use a formatting software like Vellum or Atticus, they have large print options for the formats that you can use. Under Vellum, it's under the accessible formats. You can get a specific trim size for large print. And then if you upload through Ingram Spark, there's a little checkbox in the upload form that says, is this book large print? And checking that box will mean that when librarians are looking for large print books and they click on the filter to filter down to just the large print books, your book will show up. For personal experience, I just started setting this up at the beginning of May, and I've already sold like 10-15 copies of my books in like 2 months, which is pretty good. So, and that's with me doing basically no promo. That's just the fact that the books exist as large print books in the catalog and that librarians can access it. I don't know if they're all purchased by libraries, but probably most of them. And also, if you decide to go down the large print path, you can do either paperback or hardcover. Both have their advantages. Paperback is cheaper and easier for people to hold, generally speaking, whereas hardcover is more durable. So it's a little bit better of an investment for a library to purchase it because it can go through multiple patrons and last for years. So both have their pros and cons. So you can do both, or you can do whichever one makes most sense for you. But large print is a good option too if you're wanting to get into libraries. And a lot of indie authors don't go into large print, so it is currently not a very competitive field yet. So it's mostly trad publishers that use that. So a good option to explore.
Definitely.
Hell yeah.
Well, especially because, like, I think the reason why we don't invest in large print as a community of authors is because we assume that large print is only for people who are older. And especially queer authors, we're like, oh, well, are older people going to want to read our younger characters and our queer books? And not only are there plenty of older people who love our books, but there's also the whole thing of older individuals are not the only ones who need large print. There are many people with visual disabilities that large print helps them have access to books that they enjoy. So
Visual impairment can strike anyone with eyes at any time, at any age.
That's the reason I took a class by Erin Wright, which for any indie authors listening, I do recommend the class. It was very informative. And I wasn't going to take it because I'm like, I don't think that fits my demographic. I don't think I need to do that. And I was talking to Sebastian, and he basically said what he just said now. And I was like, you're right. I'll take the class. And now I did, and I'm very glad that I did, because it has already been, even if it's like a fix it and forget it, kind of a crock-pot situation where you just set them up one day and then leave them alone, it's still a nice little passive income, and you're helping a bunch of patrons who might not get access to queer indie books otherwise, and that's honestly a gift that you are giving them.
Also, even if only elderly people used large print, despite the Reagan administration's best efforts, there are elderly queer people.
There are elderly queer people, yes.
that's what I'm saying.
It's true.
And they deserve good books.
They do.
Y'all, how can you help your library?
Step 1, go to the library.
Great.
Go to the library.
That's it.
If you are an author or a reader who goes to coffee shops to write, consider mixing it up with your library instead, or add them to your rotation. You will get free Wi-Fi, typically. You will be a body walking through the door that they can prove that they are necessary and need to stay open and get funding.
Yes. So much so.
If you go to the library and take a book off the shelf, do not return it to the shelf. Instead, put it on the collection cart. These collection carts help librarians keep track of and improve the amount the patrons use the library's shelf collection, which is very important when it comes time for the library to request funding. I know you think you're being helpful by putting the book back exactly where you found it. I love you for this. However, it is so much more helpful for you to put it on the collection cart.
I don't love you for if you put that book exactly where you found it, I guarantee you're not putting it back exactly where you found it. It's in the wrong spot. And then bitches like me gotta go searching through the shelves to find it. And then books get lost and then people can't check them out. So that's another reason. I mean, that's a very small reason to help your library, is to make our jobs easier by letting us do our jobs. So just put your books on the reshelving carts, and that lets us know what you're reading, what you're taking off the shelf, and then lets us put it back in the right spot so that I don't have to feel my brain coming out of my ears. Thank you.
Oh no. Please keep Tessa's brain inside of her ears. Put it on the cart.
Please keep my brain inside my ears.
On a similar vein, you can attend library events such as workshops and craft nights and D&D or board game meetups or classes or author talks. Go to the library, ask what they've got going on, check it out, meet new people, show up and prove that your library has patrons who need them, give them funding.
And if you can't go to the library, you can also share their stuff online on social media, where they're often talking about events now.
Hell yeah.
I feel like a lot of libraries are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And using the Libby and Hoopla apps are a good way to be involved in your library, even if you can't go. Because not everyone is physically able to go, or not very often. So you could still use it. It just may look different for you.
Also, in a tip I stole from a Tumblr post, if your library has a pride display out, interact with it. Tell the librarians how much you like it. Tell them in writing afterwards how much you enjoyed and appreciate that they put together a pride display, because then they can use this as evidence against bigots who will try to get pride displays removed from libraries.
Can I tell a story?
Absolutely.
So, as you might have gathered, I live in Erie, Pennsylvania, and last year, the main branch of our library put up this beautiful, wonderful pride display in the children's library. Our county executive, I'm not going to say his name, he threw a fit and made the library take the display down. As a result, we hosted a sit-in where the whole big children's library was completely full of people, where we all just sat on the floor with signs. We read queer books. So I took my hard copy of Kit and Basie and I was proofreading it. And so this year, I just read the article this morning that the library now has a policy in its books and on its websites that displays of that nature that show different cultures and backgrounds and stuff cannot be removed and will be displayed. I mean, if people have concerns, they can voice them, but it will not necessarily lead to the display being removed.
Heck yeah.
So then that pride display is now protected, and it's now in a safe place in the children's library.
Love it.
Awesome.
Happy ending. It was really cool. We ended up on the news.
That's so great.
Nice. You can also volunteer at your library,
I do that.
like I did in high school, as a page. That was my actual title. I was a library page. I felt very medieval and very fancy.
That's so cute.
It's kind of sick as hell, though. A lot of times, too, libraries will have some sort of nonprofit that assists it. Like, we have the Erie County Public Library, and then we also have Friends of the Erie County Public Library. And it's that nonprofit that fundraises a lot of the money that then gets put into the programs like the classes and the extra things for the kids. So, because it's a nonprofit, a lot of times these organizations need volunteers. So keep an eye out for that as well. If they have like book sales or something, you can go sell books. It's really easy, I promise.
They have a cool thrift bookstore underneath one of the libraries here, and I love it. I visit it all the time, and it's like
Same.
almost always open, and it's great.
I love my library bookstore. I go all of the time. It gives me a lot of joy to go shop there.
In a similar vein, you can donate to these book sales or fundraisers.
We had a book sale at my library this year. We raised $700 for a scholarship for a student who had passed away. Like, that's incredible. And it was all because people had donated their books.
That's amazing.
You can also prove that your library has patrons who need it by accessing the library's digital collection through Libby and Hoopla, as we mentioned previously. And, arguably, the most important way to support your local library is to vote in your local elections. Because local governance determines library funding. And if someone threatens to cut library funding, in the immortal words of Con O'Neill, vote the fuckers out.
I'm looking at you, county executive.
Or, if there's no one on the ballot who represents your library needs, you may be the perfect candidate not just for yourself but for other like-minded individuals, so consider running for office in your local elections. If you can't find the representative you need, be that representative.
Be the representative you want to see in the world.
Truly.
Can I hop on my soapbox here? This wasn't one of the original questions, but it was something that I was thinking about, so I wrote notes on it.
Go for it.
Okay, listener, if you are thinking of becoming a librarian, here is the very short SparkNotes version of how to do so. So there are many different ways to go about it. The steadfast way is to go to library school, often get your undergraduate degree in anything you want. But then you can go and get your master's in, we call it the M-List degree. It's Masters of Library and Information Science. Academic libraries are going to require that you have that degree in order to operate as a librarian. However, if you don't have a degree, don't fret. I don't have the degree. You'll still be able to apply for like library clerk positions, manager positions, or other specialist positions, just like me. Some public libraries will consider you a librarian if you have enough experience and credentials. So, for example, I've been working in my library for 10 years, just about. Not necessarily in the same role, but I've been in all different sorts of jobs at that library for 10 years. And so, with that level of experience, some public libraries might say she can operate as a librarian. So, you finally get enough education or experience. If you're looking for a job, be prepared to move. There might not be a lot of available positions in your area, or if there are, they might not be very high paying. You might have to move to where the high paying jobs are. For instance, there was a library in my area where they had the director position open, and they were going to pay, on the listing they had, $30,000 a year, which is not far off of what you would expect to make in like my level of library work. Some positions are remote, and one thing to expect is that they're very slow to fill. So if you place an application, there's a lot of red tape and a lot of approval and budgetary stuff that has to happen. So you might be job searching and have applications and libraries that are in there for a year before you hear back from anyone. Just be patient and see if you can rack up some more experience while you're waiting. You could also start by volunteering and see if you like the atmosphere, the values, and the structure of your library. And if you don't, that way you know ahead of time not to invest your time in applying or whatever. So I hope that inspired you to become a librarian, just like me and my friends.
Also, as I understand it, unless you're like very specifically an archivist, working at a library is a lot less about reading books and a lot more about serving the community. It's a lot of customer service type work.
It is, but another thing that I found, so when I was doing my degree in organizational leadership, I tried to focus it on library science just so I was getting that type of education out of it. And one thing I found in my research was that library staffs are often filled with people who are neurodivergent. Either we're autistic or we're ADHD or we're both or what have you. And the library is a really good place if you have a lot of love and compassion for your community and you want to serve people, but you don't have the spoons or the ability to, go out and do like be a 911 dispatcher or something like something that serves the community in a much more stressful way. So it's a really low stress job in most cases, depending on where your public library is located or what the situation is. But at the same time, like, you're still with people, you're still serving them, which is always, always, always the priority.
So in conclusion, library is good. We love libraries. And if you try to defund the library, I will find you.
Sebastian is very rambunctious today. He's very serious.
You will pry my library from my cold, dead hands.
How I feel too.
Honestly, though, that's how I feel. It's really been such a place of joy for me these past few years. It's just, I don't know, I really enjoy going.
It's beautiful, it's perfect, it's reliable, it's accessible, and it's what we all need in this cold, cruel world.
To conclude, 5 things librarians want you to know from me and my staff.
Oh, hell yeah.
Saddle up, everybody. The first one is that you are welcome in our library, regardless of what is going on in your area politically, regardless of who else is in the library with you. First and foremost, that space is for you to serve you, and we are here to help. So if you're not sure if we can assist, don't be afraid to come up and ask for help. Librarians are very diverse, like I just said. A lot of us are neurodivergent, we're queer, we grew up in libraries, so we want to accept you as you are. Come up to us. Number 2! Most of us don't care if you have fines. Okay, don't get embarrassed. Don't worry about how many fines you have. I promise I've had worse. I just paid off a $12 fine for a book that they thought was missing but was still in my greedy possession. If you're worried about paying off those fines that you think the librarians are going to judge you, we're not. We love you. A lot of times we'll even waive them. I waive fines like it's my life's work. Number 3, if you have to research something, start with your local library. This one comes from my coworker who would like to emphasize that libraries have research databases like Sebastian was saying, JSTOR, and other online resources that are not behind a paywall. So if you have research, start with us, because then we can make sure that we still have access to those resources and that you have access to a lot of complex information that you might need. Number 4, this comes from me. Supporting your local library does support the author. A lot of people mistakenly believe that because you're getting a book from the library, you're not supporting the author. And we've talked about all the different ways why that is, so I'm not going to get into it. But just know that we would rather have you check out books from a library than pirate them, especially. And then the last one is that if we don't have it, we can get it for you. So if you don't see something in our catalog, if you don't see something that you need in a database or something, we can find it for you. We can reach out to a county clerk. We can swim the ocean and bring a book back for it. Just trust us to search through all the rocks and rivers and all the things that we need to look through to get you the things that you need. Because we will do our best to make sure that happens.
If I could add to that, I sold books this past weekend at the Pride Festival here. There was a lot of people that really loved Phantom and Rook and the other books, and they're like, oh, this looks so great. I really wish I could read it, but I just don't have the money. I was like, well, you know what? The library over there across the street, they have it, and over in this other town, they have it too. Maybe that made it so they would never buy one of my books, but that's okay. They still have the opportunity to read it, and that's what matters to me. I would rather that than nothing at all, or have it being pirated, for sure.
Yeah, if you're an author and you're thinking, I don't want my book in a library because then I don't get that sweet, sweet cash, consider having your book in a library means it is now accessible to quite possibly thousands of readers who maybe won't want to wait for the hole to come up for the next book of yours they read and will buy it direct, or will tell their friends who don't use the library to buy it direct, or will leave a delightful review for you on Goodreads or some other service online that will direct other readers to buy your books. More readers always good, even if they don't have to fork over $5.
Mhm.
Library's good, actually, for everyone.
Yeah,
Here.
I just got an email from someone in Oregon who checked out my book from a library and then sent me an email to tell me how much that they enjoyed it. And I was like, damn, I love the library. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, thank you all for joining me in this audio love letter to libraries.
We love you, libraries.
If listeners want to know where to find you and your books so they can request them through their local libraries, where can they connect with you?
You can connect with me online. I'm in Libby for Phantom and Rook, so you can click that little notify me thing. And I should be on Hoopla as well.
You can connect with me on Instagram, Sarah Wallace Writer, and my books are on Hoopla, and you can request them on Libby as well as ebook and audiobook.
And I'm, as always, on Instagram under tess.carletta and tesscarletta.com. And Kitten Basie is still on its way into both Libby and Hoopla because, again, it does take a long time. But if you're in Erie, there are books in a few of the branches, so you can find the books there.
And you can find me and all my various social media on sebastiannothwell.com. I will always be there, lurking, shrieking about libraries.